Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. I'm Emmanuel, I'm an airline pilot, and welcome to our cruise tutorial in the JustFlight Avro RJ in Microsoft Flight Simulator. We've just reached a cruising altitude of 28,000 feet, and with that we have a couple of standard procedures that we need to carry out. First of all, we got to dial in our cruising speed, and the cruising speed is a whole philosophy on its own. So, between the different RJ pilots that I've talked to, and between all the different company procedures I have seen, normally we came to the conclusion that cruise speeds vary between Mach 0.63 on the lower end and Mach 0.72 on the higher end. Fair intermediate cruising speeds that I have seen with many operators are around Mach 0.67 to Mach 0.70, with 70 already being on the rather fast side. Today I'm going to use Mach 0.70, since that is currently the only cruising speed calculation that SimBrief has available. Now, next up we are going to move down to our weather radar. We are going to select a tilt that's somewhere down below our current flight level, so something around -1 normally works rather well, with a range somewhere around 100 to 200 nautical miles. That gives you a good picture of what's going to come ahead of you, while also not giving you any nonsense information, because weather radar returns do get worse the further you are from the actual weather cell. Moving further down, we have a quick look at our TCAS, where we're going to select the below mode, and where we are going to select the range to the maximum, so that we can see any other traffic that might affect us on our TCAS. Why below? Quite easy. We are not going to do an emergency climb, but we might very well do an emergency descent, and therefore we want to see what's going on below us. Now, those are the most important items done. We also check our cabin pressurization, making sure that we've got a good and constant cabin altitude with 0 rate of climb and a constant differential pressure. Thereafter, we can start doing a little bit of paperwork. So let's move into our operational flight plan and do a couple of fuel checks. We have just overflown a Targo, which we should have overflown at 22 minutes into the flight. Now, we should have 3,700 kilos of fuel on board, and if we look down here, we actually have 4,400. A little bit extra, but that's because this up here is our minimum fuel, and we did load up a little bit extra earlier on, so our fuel usage is generally looking good. What's also quite useful is to have a look into the en route chart and zoom out to a decent setting, so that you can see any boundaries in the flight information region that you might be flying over. So, for example, we can see over here that we are right now in the Langen FIR, and over here will come the Bremen FIR. Likewise, the upper airspace is of course split slightly different, but in general you want to figure out any waypoints along your flight path, and you want to mark them using the fix page down here in your FMS. Now, the FMS is the next important point, so let's go ahead and have a look at the information that we have available in flight. We're going to start with the VNAV page. Over here you have a couple of basic information. First of all, the maximum achievable flight level. Do note that, like I've detailed in my climb tutorial, most operators were only certified to climb up to 31,000 feet or flight level 310 in the RJs, while only some operators were certified up to flight level 350. You will notice that the RJ is always going to tell you the maximum flight level without that 310 limitation. So in most cases 350. But that does not automatically mean that you can climb up here. You basically need to know what your operator is going to do. On a small background information here, the JustFlight RJ is configured that it is able to fly to level 350. Now, today though, we are flying a Swiss aircraft, and Swiss was not configured for that. Swiss had a service ceiling at 310, so 310 is what we're going to use. You will notice that you also have the time and distance to the top of descent available over here, but do notice that the top of descent is an advisory top of descent in the RJ. It is available on your nav display to view, so you do have it up here, but remember the aircraft does not have VNAV. Repeat after me, the aircraft does not have VNAV. So the top of descent is advisory information only, and you need to cross-check it manually in order to determine your actual start of the descent. Normally, the FMS calculated top of descent works rather well, but you need to have an eye on it. Now, how does the FMS calculate the top of descent then? For that we need to look at the LEX page. And the LEX page gives you several different pieces of information. First of all, are we allowed to fly in the airspace where we currently are? For that, we need to fulfill a certain RNP, which normally is 2.0 in en route operations over Europe. We are flying with an RNP of 1.0 here, and the actual is 0. So that tells us, okay, we don't have any problems with our navigational accuracy. In the real airplane, this can look quite different, believe me. The RMP up here also tells us what that scale on our primary flight display indicates. You will notice a little scale down here, and this is our lateral deviation from the flight path. And the width of the scale is going to equal the RMP value. So RMP1 means we've got 1 nautical mile to either side of that scale up here. Now, let's go ahead and move a little bit forward in our LEX page. We need to ensure that we've got a good altitude restriction for our descent. For instance, we have NOLGO over here, which has a constraint between 4000 and flight level 110. Now this is completely fine. With that, we know that the aircraft wants to reach NOLGO at flight level 110, and that is what our top of descent is based on. In other words, we do have sensible and reliable top of descent data shown over here, and we can use that for our flight planning and for determining when to start our descent procedures. But for this to be accurate, you need to check the LEX page and ensure that it actually is accurate. Now, apart from that, we do have the fixed page available, where we can enter, for example, FIR boundaries, like I said earlier. For example, if we assume LNAT is a boundary, we could just copy it from the LEX page and enter it over here, maybe enter a small ring around it to improve the visibility of that waypoint, such as over here, for example. Now we knew that LNAT was an FIR boundary. Now, some flight plan layouts might have that information listed in the nav log. In other cases, you might have to get it from the en route chart. In any case, this is a good practice to keep an eye on when you are entering a new airspace. We also have the progress page, where we've got general information such as the distance remaining or the time of our arrival, as well as the fuel on our arrival. What's quite useful as well is the next page, where you have information like the current outside air temperature. You will notice that the Avro does often only fly in altitudes where icing conditions can still exist, contrary to your favorite Airbus or Boeing aircraft, which usually fly at altitudes where icing is not a factor. In the Avro, icing might be a factor. You will also note that the Avro is flying quite a bit slower than those aircraft, which leads to a smaller RAM rise, and therefore an outside air temperature over here that is colder than what you are normally used to in your favorite Boeing or Airbus aircraft. Now, last but not least, let's talk about some airspeeds. You will notice that while you do have a maximum airspeed over here, you often don't see a minimum airspeed. But what are the minimum speeds that we can actually fly? Well, let's go ahead and have a little look. So the minimum airspeed is based on the VFTO. Now, VFTO needs to be determined from the airspeed chart that we have on the side over here. So be sure that you always have the correct weight selected. Now this happens automatically, so we don't need to worry about it. And then we've got VFTO down here, which is currently 181 knots. Now the minimum speeds for us to fly are based on that, and up to flight level 100 our minimum speed is VFTO, so 181 knots at the moment. Up to flight level 200 the minimum is VFTO plus 10, up to flight level 270 it is VFTO plus 20, and above flight level 270 the minimum speed is VFTO plus 30. In other words, right now, with VFTO being 181, our minimum airspeed that we can fly is 211 knots. So as you can see, we do have quite a wide range of speeds that the airplane is capable of flying. However, we still need to be rather careful here, especially when operating very close to the maximum altitudes, where our indicated airspeed is going to become quite a bit less due to the changeover to Mach numbers with higher altitude and decreasing temperatures. Last but not least, a little background on how the auto throttle is operating, because this might become relevant when you are encountering wind shifts or when you are flying through turbulence. So the auto throttle is only capable of setting the maximum thrust that you've got selected up here on the TRP. By default, we use the climb norm setting in cruise. So by default, this determines the maximum N1 setting that the auto throttle is capable of reaching. The background for this is that the climb norm provides us with a little bit reduced N1 setting here, which means that our engines are going to run at colder temperatures, and therefore we need less maintenance and the engines are going to increase its lifetime. However, when we encounter turbulence, we may select MCT up here, which as you can see gives us quite an increased N1 and therefore provides us the possibility to power out of a low speed situation that might otherwise not be possible while we are in the climb norm setting. This becomes especially relevant if you are cruising in icing conditions and therefore need to turn on the engine anti-ice, thereby reducing the maximum N1 that your engines can reach. Alright, I do hope that I was able to shed a little bit of light in some of the cruising procedures in the Avro RJ series. As always, thank you very much for watching. I hope that you've learned something today. Be sure to leave your feedback in the comments below, and as always, like, comment and subscribe, and if you really love what I'm doing on this channel, I would appreciate a small donation through the Buy Me a Coffee link in the video description below. Thank you very much for watching, and I'm looking forward to see you all again on the next one.